My family snickered when I turned up in a $6 hoodie at my sister's engagement party. Her fiancé shot me a grin and asked, "Did you Uber here?" I only nodded. By the next morning, he walked into a board meeting and found me at the head of the table. They called me a struggling freelancer, a charity case, and a cheap hoodie. But they had no idea the empire I'd quietly built and the earthquake I was about to unleash on their perfect world. The air at the lakeside estate was thick with expensive perfume and polite whispers, but all I could hear was the echo of judgment. If you've ever felt like an uninvited guest at your own life, you know that feeling. I'm Ethan, 33, and that night, I walked into my little sister Olivia's engagement party wearing a $6 hoodie, catching side eyes like I'd tracked mud across white carpet. But this story doesn't start at the party. It starts with a family that forgot who I was, and a fiancé who should have kept his mouth shut. I was always the quiet one. Not shy, just observant. I learned early that with parents like Sarah and David, who valued appearances over substance, and a younger sister who could do no wrong, it was easier to keep my head down. My parents weren't bad people, just deeply invested in what others thought. To them, success looked like Instagram-perfect vacations and private schools. So, when I told them I wasn't going to college, choosing instead to build a tech startup from my room, they just patted my shoulder. It's good to dream, Ethan. Just be realistic. That was over a decade ago. They still think I'm a little lost, maybe even pitiful. That's partly my fault. I stopped trying to explain what I do years ago. I let them believe I freelanced, lived in a modest apartment because I couldn't afford better, when the truth was, I owned the building. I didn't drive a flashy car, wear designer clothes, or flash money. Why would I? I wasn't trying to prove anything. Or maybe, deep down, I just wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing. Olivia is the golden child. Always has been. If I brought home an A-, it was, "Ethan, you can do better." If she got a B-, it was, "Well, that subject's not her strength." She's 4 years younger, bubbly, fashionable, and oblivious enough to get away with things that would sound arrogant from anyone else. I don't dislike Olivia, not really. But she's never truly seen me. She talks at me, not to me. And lately, since she got engaged to Brandon, the distance between us has become a canyon. Brandon is something else. Picture every finance bro stereotype rolled into one tall, smug package. Perfect hair, fake laugh, and a handshake just a little too firm, like he's trying to assert dominance during brunch. We'd met a handful of times, and every interaction left me needing a shower. The first time, he looked me up and down like I was a delivery guy. He asked what I did for fun with that polite edge people use when they don't care. When Olivia chimed in with, "Ethan's still working on his app stuff," Brendan's eyebrows raised slightly, nodding like I was a high schooler learning to code. I never corrected them. So, when the invitation to Olivia's engagement party arrived, I knew what to expect. It wasn't really for me, it was for show. They were throwing it at a lakeside estate near the city, one of those places with white tablecloths and fairy lights. The invite said cocktail attire, which in my family meant spending at least $300 or being talked about. I showed up in jeans, sneakers, and that $6 hoodie I picked up as a joke. Not to make a statement, just because I felt like it. And maybe, yeah, a little part of me wanted to see what would happen. The moment I stepped into the main courtyard, I felt it. Heads turned, conversations slowed. My mom, Sarah, blinked twice, then forced a tight smile, bracing herself for someone else to notice. My dad, David, gave me a nod from across the patio, then quickly resumed laughing with a group of Brendan's uncles. But it was Brandon who sealed the moment. He strolled over, wineglass in hand, his suit tailored like he'd been dipped in money. He looked me up and down again with that scanning gaze, and grinned. "Did you Uber here, Ethan?" he asked, loud enough that 2 of Olivia's friends turned their heads. I smiled, nodded once, and shrugged. Something like that. He chuckled, the kind of laugh meant to be shared, like a joke at someone's expense. "Well, hey, good to see you, man. Olivia will be thrilled you made it. Then he patted my shoulder, like he was being generous with his time, and sauntered off. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. The way everyone looked so polished, so performative. Olivia's friends posing for selfies. My mom explaining the food like she'd planned the menu herself. And there I was, the brother in the cheap hoodie, with wine I didn't really want, in a place I didn't feel welcome. But I didn't leave. I stayed. I made small talk. I smiled when people asked about my work and let them fill in the blanks with whatever assumptions they wanted. I let my aunt suggest I could help with Olivia's wedding website since I'm so good with computers. I didn't correct her either. Not that night. Because I knew something no one else in that courtyard knew. Something Brandon, with his smirk and condescending tone, was about to find out in the most delicious way possible. The next morning, Brandon had a board meeting scheduled in the metropolitan area. I knew this because I'd seen the calendar, not from snooping, but because his firm had just signed a 5-year lease on the 27th floor of a building I own, a building I'd personally purchased through a holding company 3 years ago. And tomorrow, I was going to be sitting at the head of that conference table, not as a guest, not as a silent investor, but as the founder of the tech firm that had just acquired a 35% stake in his company's latest venture. But of course, he didn't know that yet. And that made what came next all the more satisfying. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was upset, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the way Brandon said it. Did you Uber here? The tone was casual, harmless on the surface, but underneath, it was a public jab, a subtle way of telling everyone, hey, this guy doesn't belong here. What made it worse wasn't that he said it, but that nobody around me blinked. No one stepped in, not even Olivia. She was too busy soaking up the attention. But that's always how it's been. Olivia shines, and everyone else fades. I got back to my place around midnight, sat on the edge of my bed, and pulled off my sneakers. I live in the top floor unit of a restored pre-war building in the heart of the city. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows. Not that my family knows that. As far as they're concerned, I'm still renting a cramped walk-up. I don't show off, not because I'm humble. I just learned a long time ago that flaunting things only fuels their weird mix of judgment and jealousy. Still, as I looked out across the skyline that night, I felt something in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite sadness either, more like a deep ache. I'd built a life I was proud of, quietly, deliberately. And yet, here I was, feeling like a teenager all over again, like the kid who didn't get invited to prom, only to find out later that his sister helped plan it. The morning came too fast. I put on a clean white button-down, navy blazer, and tailored slacks. Nothing flashy, just sharp enough to command attention in a boardroom. I don't wear watches, but I slipped on the silver one my old co-founder gave me when we hit our first million. It still ticks like the day he gave it to me. By 8:15, I was pulling into the underground garage of the commercial tower my real estate firm manages. The 27th floor had just been renovated. Glass-walled conference rooms, soundproof pods, a lobby barista. Brandon's company, Virion Capital, had moved in last month. The deal had been brokered by one of my holding companies, my name never showed up on a single piece of paper. That's how I like it. Quiet leverage. I took the elevator to the executive conference room and greeted my assistant, Chloe, who had already prepped the room. I wasn't just attending today, I was leading it. My software firm had recently partnered with Virion's new venture, a fintech platform that needed the tech infrastructure we had already built. The meeting was set to finalize a roadmap and discuss equity structuring. Brandon had no idea. As the room filled with suits, I took a seat at the head of the table, sipping my coffee, calm, steady, focused. At 9:03, Brandon strolled in with his usual swagger. He was mid-laugh with one of his analysts, not even glancing toward the head of the table until he did. Then he froze. I didn't say anything, just gave him a polite nod, watching the confusion flicker across his face like a power outage. You could almost hear the mental gears grinding as he processed what he was seeing. He opened his mouth, about to say something, then closed it. Slowly, he found his seat at the side of the table. The energy in the room shifted ever so slightly, but that was just the start. The days leading up to that meeting truly told me where I stood with my family. Let me rewind. After the engagement party, I figured I'd call Olivia to check in. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt I should. I hadn't seen her much since she started dating Brandon, and even less since they got engaged. The last real conversation we had was months ago when I offered to help with the wedding planning, maybe cover some tech or booking logistics. She smiled and said, "That's sweet, but Brandon has it all under control." So, I called her the next day. She didn't pick up. Sent a text 20 minutes later, "Hey, busy W/tasting menu today. So fun last night though." No follow-up. No thanks for coming. No sorry about Brandon being a tool. Just 3 exclamation marks and 2 heart emojis. That's when the messages from Mom, Sarah, started rolling in. "Ethan, I hope you understand that Brandon's humor just takes some getting used to. Don't be too sensitive. It was cocktail attire, sweetie. Maybe next time wear a sport coat. Olivia said you seemed a little distant. Try to be more engaged next time. It's her special moment." Each message felt like a little push, nudging me back into line, like I was the one who had embarrassed the family, like Brandon was some kind of social barometer I had failed to meet. And then came the big one. A week after the party, I got an email from Dad, David. Not a call, an email. Subject line, "Financial assistance for Olivia's wedding." It was addressed to me, Olivia, my parents, and 2 aunts. The body read like a proposal, literally. Bullet points, a spreadsheet attached. Dad had outlined a funding plan for the wedding expenses totaling just under $180,000. Venue, catering, custom invitations, luxury transportation, a live jazz band, and a destination honeymoon. He was asking each family unit to contribute, including me. $30,000. Now, look, I'm not stingy. I've helped people out. But this felt different. It wasn't an ask, it was an expectation. No one had spoken to me about it beforehand. No one asked if I could contribute. Just assumed I'd be fine covering my share. I stared at the email for a long time, then I did something I hadn't done in years. I replied, "Hi all, appreciate you putting this together. A few thoughts." I wasn't aware Olivia's wedding had turned into a group-funded venture. I haven't been involved in any part of the planning and wasn't consulted about this request. I'd be happy to support in a way that feels appropriate and respectful, but $30,000 without prior discussion isn't it? If Olivia and Brandon want a wedding of this scale, perhaps they should also be contributing proportionately. Best, Ethan. Within hours, I got a phone call from Mom. "Ethan," she said, already exasperated. "Why did you write that email?" "Because I meant it," I said flatly. "You made us all look bad, like we're trying to bleed you dry." "Are you not?" I asked. She sighed. "This is Olivia's big moment. She deserves the best." "So did I," I said quietly. "But I didn't get a dime when I launched my company, or when I moved into my first place, or when I had to choose between eating dinner or paying rent." "That was different," she said. "Why?" "Because you wanted to take the hard route. Olivia's doing things the right way." I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. We ended the call shortly after, but I could feel the ice forming beneath the surface. Later that night, Olivia texted me. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was, just this: "Can you at least try to be supportive? It's not all about you, Ethan." That one hit different, not because it was harsh, but because it showed just how far gone she was. I didn't reply. Instead, I started making calls, quiet ones, to my legal team, to my operations lead, to the people I trust most. Because if they were going to treat me like a nobody, like some hoodie-wearing outsider who didn't deserve a seat at the table, I was going to remind them that I built the table. But before I could even begin to implement what I was planning, something happened that pushed everything over the edge. Something that changed the dynamic in a way none of them could walk back from. And it all started with a dinner invitation from Brandon. Brendan's text came 2 days after the email debacle. It was short, casual, almost too casual. "Hey man, let's grab dinner this week. Just us. My treat." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he meant to send it to someone else. Or maybe Olivia or my parents had gotten in his ear and told him to smooth things over. Either way, it felt off. But part of me, some naive buried part, thought maybe he was trying. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted to extend an olive branch or at least clear the air before the wedding planning became a full-blown Cold War. So, I said yes. He picked the place. This swanky New Age steakhouse in the metropolitan area with dark lighting, $50 appetizers, and menus printed on black matte cardstock. You know the type. The kind of place that doesn't put prices next to the Wagyu. And the waiter acts like you're beneath him if you don't order the chef's tasting menu. I got there 10 minutes early. Brandon rolled in 20 minutes late. No apology, just a casual, "Traffic, man, you know how it is." He was already on the phone when he sat down, laughing with someone named Marcus about some deal going sideways. No acknowledgement, no greeting, just plopped into the booth and kept yapping like I was his assistant. Eventually, he hung up and leaned back, loosening his collar like the conversation had exhausted him. "So," he said, flashing that same rehearsed grin he wore at the engagement party, "thanks for meeting. I know things have been weird." Weird? That was one way to put it. I didn't say much. Just nodded and let him talk. "You know how families are," he continued. "Drama, egos, old stuff bubbling up. But Olivia really wants this whole thing to go smoothly. And your mom's been a little stressed." "Has she?" I said flatly. He paused, studying me for a second. "Look, man, I get it. You're the older brother, and maybe you feel a little sidelined right now." I blinked. Sidelined? Yeah. I mean, you've always kind of done your own thing, right? Not super involved, kind of off the grid, which is cool, dude. Seriously. But when it comes to big events like this, people notice. I felt something tighten in my jaw. People notice a lot of things. He smiled like I just made his point for him. "I just think," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, "maybe you could, be a little more mindful of how you show up. That hoodie at the party? Come on, man. You had to know that wasn't a great look." I stared at him. I didn't realize it was a job interview. He laughed. "No, but think of it from Olivia's perspective. Everyone's looking at photos, sharing them on socials, and then there's your hoodie in the background. It just didn't match the vibe." I wanted to walk out right then and there, but I didn't. I waited. Let him keep digging. "Olivia said you're not really helping out with the wedding," he added, swirling his whiskey. "And that's fine. I know you've got your own stuff going on, but she's your sister. You only get married once." I arched an eyebrow. "Do you?" He smirked. "Hopefully." Then, just as the waiter came to take our order, Brendan said something that flipped the entire night on its head. "Oh, and by the way," he said, waving off the menu without even looking at it, "I had a little chat with your dad about the wedding fund stuff. Figured I'd offer a suggestion." I set my menu down. "What kind of suggestion?" He sipped his drink, then said, "Told him I'd be willing to cover your share of the expenses, like, as a gesture, clean slate and all, so you don't have to worry about the 30 grand. I stared at him. Excuse me? He grinned. Yeah, I know things have been tight for you. Olivia mentioned you're still freelancing and kind of between gigs, and I figured why make this harder than it has to be. It's just money. No big deal. There it was. Olivia told him I was broke. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. You offered to pay my share, I said slowly. Yeah, he said, like he was proud of it. Look, I know it might bruise your ego a little, but at the end of the day, it's just family. No need to make a scene over a few dollars. A few dollars? 30,000, covered by the man who smirked at me like I was a delivery guy. The man who assumed I Ubered to the engagement party because clearly someone like me couldn't afford anything nicer. I forced myself to stay calm. I smiled, not because I was okay, but because I realized something important in that moment. They didn't just underestimate me. They had erased me. My own sister let her fiancé believe I was struggling. My parents went along with it. No one corrected the lie because it was more convenient to keep me small. Easy, forgettable. I could have blown up right then. Could have told Brandon that I owned the building his company just moved into. That I held a controlling interest in the tech his firm was about to depend on. That his entire world was about to shift. And he didn't even see it coming. But I didn't. Because the betrayal wasn't just what he said. It was what Olivia didn't. After dinner, I didn't hear from her for a week. No call, no text, nothing. So, I called her. When she picked up, she sounded distracted. Hey, can I call you back? In the middle of finalizing the flower arrangements. I won't take long, I said. Just one question. Okay. Did you tell Brandon I was broke? There was a pause, then a sigh. Ethan, come on. Did you? I didn't say broke. I just said you've been figuring things out. Figuring things out? I repeated. I mean, aren't you? I clenched the phone tighter. Why would you say that? Why would you let him think I can't afford to contribute? I didn't let him think anything, she snapped. It's not like you've been super transparent. You don't even talk about what you do. That doesn't mean you get to fill in the blanks with whatever makes your life more convenient. Her voice went cold. You're being dramatic. I laughed. You're marrying a guy who offered to pay my share of your wedding and acted like it was charity, and you let him. He was trying to be nice. No, he was trying to assert control, and you let him do it at my expense. She didn't answer. That hurts, Olivia, I said. It really does. Well, maybe if you showed up for this family once in a while, people wouldn't have to assume anything. Click. That was it. She hung up on me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel left out. I didn't even feel angry. I felt done. But the betrayal wasn't finished yet. Not even close. 3 days later, I got an email from the wedding planner. A mass message to everyone involved. The subject line made my stomach sink: final guest roles and rehearsal dinner itinerary. Attached was a PDF with all the updated wedding details, seating charts, schedules, roles, photos, notes from Olivia in pink highlighter. I opened the file, scanned the first few pages, and then froze. Under wedding party, my name wasn't listed. I wasn't a groomsman. I wasn't doing a toast. I wasn't even seated at the family table. I'd been demoted to general guest seating. Table 17, right between college friends of the bride and neighbors of the groom's parents. No call, no explanation, no heads up, just quietly, efficiently removed. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They wanted me invisible. And that's when something shifted, something deep, something final. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I wasn't going to pretend this was normal, or healthy, or deserved. They had erased me from their perfect little narrative. They had rewritten who I was to fit their version of the story. And now it was time to write my own ending. But before I could begin, something else happened. Something that changed everything. It started with a phone call from one of Brandon's partners. And what he told me, it flipped the entire game on its head. The phone rang just after 7 a.m. I was sitting on the patio of my place, coffee in hand, watching the city start its day. My mind was still spinning from that PDF. The table assignment, the way my name was buried like an afterthought. I hadn't spoken to Olivia since the call. I hadn't responded to the wedding planner. I hadn't told anyone how much that little spreadsheet gutted me. I just sat with it. Let it settle. Let the silence thicken. Then came the call. Ethan Everett, the voice said, smooth but cautious. This is Ethan. It's Daniel from Vitech Partners. Brandon passed me your contact. Said you'd be the point person on the DevOps licensing questions. That made me sit up a little straighter. DevOps licensing. Vitech. That was the back-end infrastructure deal Brandon's firm was finalizing for the fintech platform they were building. And it wasn't supposed to be public knowledge that I had any direct line to those licensing conversations. At least not yet. Sure, I said, measured. How can I help? Daniel hesitated for half a second, like he was unsure how much to say. So, look, I'll just be upfront. We've been reviewing the equity splits Brandon proposed last week, and there's some stuff that's not lining up. There's a clause in the joint venture agreement that names your firm as a key partner, but Brandon presented it like it was a third-party vendor, external only. I frowned. That's not how it was structured. Yeah, he said quickly. That's what I figured. And then I saw the name of the holding company, Thorne and Kessler Group, and I recognized it from a different file. That's yours, right? He had done his homework. Yes, I said calmly. It is. There was a pause. Okay, so here's the thing. Brandon tried to rework the contract to cut your team out of profit sharing entirely, recast you as vendors instead of strategic partners. He claimed you missed your development deadlines and voided the clause. I blinked. That clause was never voided, and we hadn't missed a single deadline. I knew, because I built the schedule. Personally. It was a lie. A paper-thin, easily refutable lie, but a lie all the same. Thanks for letting me know, I said, voice tight. I'll handle it. Daniel lowered his voice. Just be careful. I don't think he realizes who you are yet. I ended the call and stared at the skyline for a long time. The coffee in my hand had gone cold. My heart hadn't. So, this is what betrayal looks like in a suit and tie. Not just humiliation at a dinner table, not just manipulation of family dynamics. This was professional, strategic, deliberate. Brandon was trying to erase me in more ways than one. First at the engagement party, then in front of my own family, and now he was trying to cut me out of a deal I architected from the ground up, using my own infrastructure, my own codebase, and my own money. And Olivia, she was letting him. Worse, maybe she knew. That's when I hit bottom. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a slow, suffocating realization that I didn't have a sister anymore. Not really. She'd chosen someone else, over and over again. She'd traded her brother for a polished resume and a family with connections. And I'd let her do it. I'd given her space, grace, every benefit of the doubt. I'd forgiven her for being thoughtless, for being passive, for going along with a narrative that made me the family underachiever. But this wasn't passive anymore. This was a betrayal. Clear as day. And for the first time, I let myself feel it fully. I didn't eat that day. Couldn't. I left my phone on silent and let the texts pile up. Mom, Sarah, sent a link to the Airbnb she wanted me to book near the wedding venue. Olivia sent a group photo from her cake tasting with the caption, "Missing you." Brendan, God help me, sent a meme about groomsmen tuxes being too tight. I deleted it before I even finished reading. I felt like I was drifting. My world, the one I had built so carefully with late nights and tenacity, suddenly felt far away, like it didn't matter because the people I wanted to be proud of me never even noticed. That night, I walked 5 miles with no destination. Just wandered the metropolitan area in a hoodie and sneakers, the same kind that got me mocked. I passed restaurants I'd invested in anonymously, bars that used my software to manage tabs, buildings that stood tall because I wrote the code that made their systems run. And not one person knew. And maybe that was the point. Because I never wanted the spotlight. I just wanted to be respected, seen, understood. Instead, I was misunderstood by strangers and dismissed by my own blood. When I got home, the lights from the city pulsed like a heartbeat through the glass. I collapsed into the chair in the corner of my living room, the one no one ever sat in but me. And I stared into the dark for hours. Something broke that night, quietly. No rage, no slamming fists. Just silence, and a decision. I wasn't going to fight for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to show up and smile through the disrespect. I wasn't going to pour myself into people who only saw me when I was useful or convenient. But I wasn't going to get revenge either. Not yet. Because revenge implies reacting, and I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. That's when I pulled out the old leather-bound notebook from the bottom drawer of my desk. The one I hadn't touched since my second startup exit. Inside were sketches, diagrams, contingency ideas, notes I wrote to myself in moments of clarity. I flipped past pages and landed on a blank one. I wrote one word at the top, reset. Then underlined it. And I started to write ideas, steps, levers I could pull. Not to destroy, but to remind. Because sometimes the best way to handle betrayal isn't to burn the house down. It's to own it without anyone realizing. And the first domino, the one that would shift everything, was an invitation. An invitation I wasn't supposed to see. One that wasn't sent to me directly, but I saw it anyway, because Chloe, my assistant, who reads everything, forwarded it to my inbox that morning with a subject line that simply said, "You'll want to see this." It was a calendar hold for an executive brunch, a private, high-level event hosted by Brendan's firm, Virion Capital, designed to woo a set of angel investors and showcase their new fintech prototype, set to take place in 2 weeks. At a venue I happened to own. I read the invitation twice, then leaned back in my chair and, for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because I was plotting, not yet, but because the pieces were finally on the board. And this time, I wasn't playing defense. I didn't start making moves right away. That's not how you build something that lasts. You don't win the game by flipping the board. You win by rearranging the pieces so slowly, so quietly that by the time your opponent realizes what you're doing, they're already in checkmate. And after what they did, after Olivia cut me out of the wedding like I was a placeholder instead of a person, after Brendan tried to erase me from a deal I created, after Mom had the gall to send me a budget Airbnb link like I was some broke cousin scraping together change just to show up. I wasn't just playing for a win. I was building an empire they couldn't ignore. It started small, not flashy, just a series of quiet conversations. I met with my legal team, not to sue anyone, not yet, just to review the terms of the Vitech partnership and make sure every clause, especially the ones involving revenue sharing and tech licensing, was airtight. I had structured the deal through a separate holding company years ago, partially to shield my name, partially because I liked staying in the shadows. But now I needed to bring things into the light. Then I called my DevOps team into an emergency sync. Told them to double encrypt all the backend architecture, change administrative access points, and re-verify every update made in the last 30 days. Brendan had already tried to push us out once. I wouldn't give him the chance to do it again. From there, I reached out to a few friends in venture capital. Not to raise money, but to plant seeds. Subtle ones. I knew Brendan's firm had been shopping their prototype around to a few angel funds. What he didn't know is that 2 of those funds were run by people I'd mentored 5 years ago when they were still building pitch decks in coffee shops. I didn't tell them to blacklist him. I didn't have to. All I did was explain calmly and clearly how the foundation of the project was built on infrastructure I owned, and how Brendan had tried to cut me out without cause. That was all they needed to hear. See, in tech, reputation spreads faster than code. And while Brendan looked good in a suit, VCs care about execution. They care about who built the thing, not just who pitched it. And I built the thing. At the same time, I started showing up again. Not at family events, not yet, but in public. At fundraisers, tech summits, startup mixers, places I used to avoid because I didn't care about clout. Now I had a reason to care. Not for me, for optics. People began whispering. Is that Ethan Everett? I thought he dropped off the map. Didn't he build that predictive engine for Sequoia's portfolio modeling? I heard he owns half the Pacific Northwest and just doesn't talk about it. I didn't correct anyone. Let them wonder. Let the silence work for me. My personal life started to shift, too. I hired a stylist, not to look flashy, just refined. Bought 2 new suits that actually fit like armor. Upgraded my car to a matte black Audi. Sleek, silent, unmistakably expensive, but only if you knew what you were looking at. Like me. I moved into the penthouse unit of my building. No announcement, no look at me moment. Just quietly handed the keys to the tenant below and took the top floor. I redecorated with clean lines, dark wood, and soft lighting. Hung 1 piece of art, a sketch of an empty throne, on the main wall. A gift from an old friend who once told me, "You don't need a crown if you own the castle." Every morning, I worked out with a private trainer. Not to get ripped, just strong, steady, focused. Every afternoon, I met with Chloe and my strategy team to revise our roadmap. We were scaling fast. And the fintech project that Brendan thought he could sideline me from? It was just one of 5 deals I had spinning now. One of 5 chessboards. He was stuck on his rook. I was already 3 moves away from queening a pawn. And then, 1 week before the executive brunch Brendan was hosting, the one he had booked in my building without realizing who signed the lease, I got a text from Olivia. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a bit. Can we talk?" It was like a ghost reaching out through the fog. I stared at the screen for a long time. We hadn't spoken since the fight, since the "you're being dramatic" phone call, since I found my name buried under table 17. But I didn't ignore her. I said simply, "Sure." When she responded almost immediately, "Come by Mom and Dad's tomorrow, just for a bit. No drama. Promise." I agreed. Not because I missed her. Not because I thought she deserved it. But because I needed to know. I needed to hear it from her mouth whether she really understood what she'd done, or if she was just trying to smooth things over before the wedding. I drove to my parents' place the next evening, wearing the same hoodie from the engagement party. Let them see the version of me they thought they knew. Olivia was already there, sitting on the patio with a glass of wine, legs crossed, staring at the sky like she was trying to remember how to be soft again. "Hey," she said as I stepped out. "Hey." We sat in silence for a moment. The air smelled like rosemary and grilled chicken. Probably something Mom was cooking inside for Brandon and his parents. "I messed up," Olivia said finally. I didn't respond. She looked over. "You don't have to forgive me. I just want you to know I've been thinking about everything." "Have you?" "Yes. And I realized I let people speak for you. I let Brandon make assumptions. I let Mom and Dad shape the narrative. And I didn't push back. I looked at her. Why? She hesitated. Because it was easier. There it was. The truth. She continued, Brandon's world is very curated. Everyone in it plays a part. I thought if I just slotted you in quietly, didn't make noise, things would go smoother. You made me invisible. I know you wanted me invisible. No, she said quickly. I just didn't know how to explain you. What you do. You've always been this mystery, and I thought if you just played along, it would be fine. It wasn't fine. She nodded. I see that now. We sat with that for a long time. I don't need an apology, I said eventually. I just need to know if this is who you are now. If you're okay marrying someone who lies about deals and treats people like props. She flinched. What happened between you two isn't personal, I cut in. It's professional, and it was a move. A calculated one. He knew what he was doing. She looked away. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't ready to confront it. Not fully. Not yet. And that was fine, because I was done waiting for her to catch up. As I stood to leave, she said quietly, You're not coming to the wedding, are you? I turned back. I haven't decided. Her eyes searched mine. If you don't come, people will notice. Let them. And then I left. The next morning, Chloe sent me the final guest list for the executive brunch Brandon was hosting. His name was printed right under the words, hosted by Thorne and Kessler in partnership with Everett Tech. It was the first time Brandon would see my name on the paperwork. It wouldn't be the last. Because while he was still busy managing impressions and playing house with a family that applauded appearances, I was rewriting the power structure beneath his feet. And the next time we met, it wouldn't be at a dinner table. It would be in a boardroom, and I would be at the head. But that confrontation, that moment where everything would come crashing down, that was still to come. And when it did, it would change everything. I didn't sleep much the night before the brunch. Not because I was nervous, but because I was wide awake, alert, focused. Every gear in my mind turning with quiet precision. This wasn't revenge yet. Not the satisfying kind. But I was setting the stage. And what I was about to learn in the next 48 hours would shift everything into high gear. See, there's a difference between having power and knowing when to use it. I'd spent years collecting leverage. But now I was finally starting to understand just how much I had, and how blind Brandon was to it. The executive. Brunch was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp at one of those sleek rooftop lounges with panoramic views of the skyline and furniture so modern it looked uncomfortable. Brandon had chosen it months ago. Thought he was being clever. Thought the exposed brick and artisanal coffee carts would impress the angel investors. What he didn't realize was that the entire venue, top to bottom, was part of a property I'd acquired quietly last year through a shell company. I didn't announce it. I just sent a quick email to the venue director the day before. Please be advised that I'll be attending the brunch event at 10 a.m. tomorrow as a representative of the parent company. Full access requested. No need to inform the client. The reply came 10 minutes later. Understood, Mr. Everett. All access granted. Staff briefed accordingly. Perfect. The morning of the event, I dressed simply. Charcoal jacket, black shirt, no tie. Professional, but understated. The kind of look that made people wonder who is that, even if they didn't recognize you right away. I walked into the venue 30 minutes early and shook hands with the general manager, toured the space, made small talk with the barista, confirmed which executive guests had RSVP'd. And that's when I saw it. The guest list, typed, printed, taped to the back of the podium where Brandon was set to give his speech. And halfway down the list, under VIP investor, confirmed attendance, was a name I hadn't seen in years, Arthur Vance. My old mentor. The first man who believed in me when I was still pitching prototype apps on my cracked MacBook. He'd once run one of the most respected fintech firms in the Pacific Northwest, retired at 45, moved to Spain, disappeared from the startup scene completely. And now he was here. And not just attending. He was listed as the primary funder for Brendan's new platform, which meant Brendan had no idea who he was dealing with. I stood there for a second, stunned. Then I did something impulsive. I pulled out my phone and texted Arthur, "Didn't know you were in town. We need to talk before Brendan starts pitching you lies." I didn't expect a reply, but 5 minutes later, I got one, on the roof deck. 10 minutes. We met where the wind could cut through your thoughts. Sunlight danced off glass towers around us. But Arthur stood in the shade, hands in his pockets, wearing a tan blazer and sunglasses that made him look like a professor on sabbatical. He hadn't aged a day. "Ethan Everett," he said, turning. "Of all the ghosts in this city." I smiled. "Didn't expect to find you funding a guy like Brendan." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to find you in his shadow." "I'm not," I said calmly. "I'm the scaffolding holding up the building he thinks he built." Arthur chuckled. "That sounds more like the Ethan I remember." I filled him in quietly, carefully, on everything. The infrastructure, the licensing, the attempted cutout, the fake deadlines. I showed him emails, documents, Slack screenshots. The truth, layered and undeniable. He didn't interrupt, didn't blink. When I was done, he just nodded slowly and said, "Then I guess we have a problem. Not if we solve it before he opens his mouth." Arthur leaned on the railing and looked out across the city. "You know, I didn't want to come back. I retired for a reason, but this deal was supposed to be clean. Simple." He pitched me vision numbers, promised your platform was just plug and play. "It's not," I said. "It's proprietary and protected, and you own it. All of it." Arthur nodded, then smiled. "Then it's time we reminded everyone in that room who they're really doing business with." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The brunch began at 10:02 a.m. sharp. I didn't enter until 10:20, right in the middle of Brendan's opening remarks. "And that's why this next phase is so crucial," he was saying, pacing the stage in a fitted blazer like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. "With the new DevOps framework, our platform can scale 10 times in the next 12 months. Then he saw me. I walked in without breaking stride, headed straight to the back, and leaned against the wall, just watching. Brendan's voice faltered for a split second. Only someone paying very close attention would have caught it. "And with our infrastructure partner, we've ensured 24/7 uptime without compromising latency." His eyes flicked to Arthur, who gave nothing away. And then, to my satisfaction, Brendan sweated. Not visibly, not like a cartoon villain melting, but subtly. The way his posture stiffened, the way his hands clenched just a little too tight on the remote, the way his voice raised a half octave when he started describing tech he didn't actually understand. I let him finish. And when the polite applause died down, Arthur stood. "Before we break for coffee," he said casually, "there's someone else in the room you all need to meet." Every head turned. Brendan froze. "This is Ethan Everett," Arthur continued. "He's the architect of the infrastructure we just heard about. And full transparency, he's the reason I'm here today." Gasps are rare in investor rooms, but there were a few. Brendan tried to recover. "Right? Yes, Ethan is. He's on the technical side, consulting mostly, very behind the scenes." I smiled. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "I own the infrastructure, and I'm not consulting. I'm partnering through Everett Tech, which your firm failed to disclose in its investor briefings." Silence. I let it sit for just a beat longer. "Don't worry," I said, addressing the room. "We've resolved the paperwork issues. Going forward, all technical inquiries should come directly to my team. We're happy to share the roadmap and access pipeline, but only with full equity protection. Arthur nodded once. Agreed. I turned to Brandon. Nice venue, by the way. I love what you've done with the place. His face paled. You. I own it, I said simply. Through one of the holdings you tried to write out of the contract. The room shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Eyes turned, minds recalculated. Brandon tried to laugh it off. Look, there's clearly been some confusion. No confusion, Arthur cut in. Just correction. Brandon floundered. We should talk privately. Already did, Arthur said, then added. We're restructuring. The brunch ended shortly after that. Not abruptly, not messily, just quietly, like a spell being broken. People whispered, cards were exchanged, hands were shaken. But no one looked at Brandon in the same way again. He brought them all here to see a king. Instead, they found the man who built the castle. And the king, he was already on the throne. But this wasn't the end. It wasn't even revenge yet. Because while Brandon had just lost face, I had just found the weak link. That night, Chloe forwarded me a confidential draft email, a resignation letter from one of Brandon's closest partners. And the reason? He'd discovered something in the financials, something illegal, something Brandon thought no one would ever find. I read the email twice. Then picked up my phone and made a call that would change everything. The call I made that night wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no threats, just a quiet, firm conversation with someone who had been watching Brandon longer than I had. Her name was Diana Reed. We'd met years ago at a fintech conference in Denver, back when I was still building prototypes in garages and she was auditing mid-tier investment firms for a regional branch. We kept in touch. Off and on since, not close friends, but mutual respect. She liked how I played the long game. I liked how she never blinked when men twice her size tried to intimidate her in boardrooms. And now she was senior counsel for financial investigations at the federal level. Diana, I said, my voice calm. I have something for you. I didn't send everything at once. That would have been messy. Instead, I packaged it clean, tight, undeniable. Years of emails, draft contracts, altered spreadsheets. Brandon's firm had been inflating user metrics for at least 2 of their portfolio companies, padding their pitch decks with data that didn't exist. And more recently, they'd quietly funneled investor capital into a shell company tied to one of Brandon's cousins in Belize. The kicker? They used my infrastructure to do it. Or rather, they tried to, because they thought I wasn't watching. But I was. I'd built in safeguards from the beginning. Mirror logs, redundant permissions. And when Brandon's CTO tried to overwrite access to a particular revenue dashboard 2 weeks ago, I flagged it, tracked it, let it run just long enough to map the pattern, and then I copied everything. Diana didn't say much when I sent the files, just replied, understood. This is sufficient. You may be contacted. Stay available. 3 days later, Brandon's office was raided. It didn't make national news, not right away, but within our world, the tight, competitive circuit of VCs, founders, and legal sharks, it was a nuclear blast. People started jumping ship. 2 analysts fled within 24 hours. Another associate lawyer leaked a whistleblower letter to 3 different firms. Word spread that someone had sabotaged the deal, but no one could pin it on me. Brandon didn't even have time to panic properly. He was too busy trying to lawyer up before the house of cards collapsed completely. And I? I kept smiling. The next part was petty, but I won't apologize for it. 2 weeks before Olivia's wedding, I got a text from Mom, Sarah. Hey honey, can you talk? I ignored it. Then another. Your sister's really upset. I think she wants to apologize. That one made me pause, but I still didn't reply. Instead, I sent Chloe a note, block off my calendar for the wedding weekend. I'll be out of the country. She replied in less than 5 minutes, done. I'll confirm your hotel in Zurich. Not long after, I got an email from Olivia. Not a text, not a call, an email. Ethan, I know I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about letting people speak for you, about not standing up for you when I should have. Brendan's not who I thought he was, and I wish I had realized that sooner. If you're willing, I'd like you to come to the wedding. I'll seat you at my table. I'll make a toast in your honor. I miss my brother, Olivia. I didn't answer right away. Not out of cruelty, just clarity. Because for the first time, I could see her clearly. She wasn't the villain. Not fully. She was just a mirror. Reflecting what the family always believed, that I was lesser until I proved otherwise. That my quiet life meant I was falling behind. That success only counted if it was photogenic. And now that the glossy version of her future was falling apart, she wanted to remember who I was. I didn't need that anymore. But I didn't need closure. So I sent one line, thanks for the note. I hope the wedding goes well. And I didn't attend. I flew to Zurich. Spent 3 days at a leadership summit hosted by a partner firm I had just acquired a 42% stake in. Then I hiked a mountain trail with 2 friends who didn't care what I wore or what car I drove. We talked about legacy, about what it meant to build things that lasted, not businesses, but relationships, trust, self-worth. The morning of the wedding, I got a final text from Olivia, "You really didn't come." I didn't respond. Because by then, she didn't need my answer. She already had it. 3 months later, Brendan was indicted. Wire fraud, securities violations, misrepresentation of investor funds. The building he leased was evicted. The deal with Vitek led Peter to pull out completely and reallocate his investment into my firm. And Olivia? She filed for annulment. Didn't even make it past the honeymoon. I never gloated. Never posted a quote about karma. Never sent a told you so email. But I did one thing. I made a quiet donation to the legal clinic where Diana got her start. In Brandon's name. Tax-deductible, non-refundable. And as for my family, they started reaching out again. Polite emails, holiday invites, the occasional "let's catch up sometime." But I didn't go back. I didn't need to. Because revenge? It wasn't the explosion. It was the silence afterward, the power shift, the understanding that the brother they ignored had become the man they couldn't reach, even if they tried. And that, more than anything, was the moment I won. But the story didn't end there, because one day Olivia showed up at my office. No appointment, no warning. She came in without a word. No receptionist, no warning text, no assistant calling ahead. Just appeared. My office is on the 34th floor, and I have 3 layers of security between the elevator and my desk. But somehow, Olivia got through. Chloe later told me she looked so pale and lost that no one had the heart to stop her. She stood there for a long moment, framed in the glass doorway, looking small in a beige coat too light for the season. I was on a call with a partner from London negotiating a merger clause. I held up one finger to signal, "Give me a second," but Olivia didn't wait. She walked in, sat down across from me, and stared out the window as if the skyline would offer her a better explanation than I could. By the time I ended the call, she hadn't moved. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. I said nothing. Just looked at her calmly. Not cruel, not cold, just tired. She swallowed hard. It's over. Everything's over. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew, but I let her speak because maybe that's what she needed. Someone who wouldn't interrupt her version of the fall. After the annulment, she said, Brendan turned vicious. said I embarrassed him. Said I ruined everything. But he was already spiraling. The indictment, his investors, everyone pulled out. He tried to spin it, but no one bought it. And now... She stopped, laughing bitterly. Now he's living at his cousin's house in New Jersey and blaming me for losing his empire. I didn't correct her. He never had an empire. He was borrowing mine. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Thick, worn at the edges. My name was scribbled on the tab. I found this in one of Brandon's storage boxes, she said. He was keeping files on you, trying to figure out what you were worth, who you knew, how he could get around your firm's ownership. It's obsessive. I took the folder, flipped through the first few pages. Printouts of corporate filings, blurry screenshots of my private Slack messages, even an NDA draft with forged signatures. She looked ashamed. I didn't know he was doing this. Did you want to know? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. No. I nodded. There it was, the real answer. She could have asked questions, could have looked deeper, could have stopped being a passive passenger in her own story. But she didn't, because it was easier not to. I was so proud of him, she said quietly. Everyone was. The way he carried himself, the things he said. And I thought if I just became part of that world, I'd finally be respected. I'd finally matter. I leaned back in my chair, looking at her, not as the sister who had betrayed me, but as the girl I once helped build a science fair project for because she was too nervous to present it alone. The one who used to curl up next to me during thunderstorms because she believed I could scare away lightning. You mattered before Brandon, I said. You just stopped believing it. She wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath. I miss you, Ethan. I didn't respond, because sometimes silence is the most honest answer. I'm not here to ask for anything, she added quickly. I just wanted you to know I see it now. What I did, how I let them treat you, how I treated you. And I'll never forgive myself for that. I stood, walked to the window, looked down at the city, pulsing below us, people scurrying to meetings, trying to matter. Olivia, I said, you don't have to spend your life apologizing. Just don't forget again. She nodded slowly, then stood. I'll go. She turned, walked to the door, then hesitated. I hope someday you'll come back. Not for them, for me. She left before I could answer. And I sat there for a long time after. The fallout came in waves. Brandon's firm officially dissolved 4 months after the raid. 2 senior partners were fined and barred from managing investment funds for a decade. Brandon himself pled down to avoid jail, but the plea agreement crippled him professionally. No one would touch him. Not in tech, not in finance, not even in the consultant circuits. His name became a cautionary tale. Olivia moved back into the city, quietly. She got a job at a non-profit. No announcements, no social media posts, just disappeared from the spotlight she once chased so desperately. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it was real, honest. No more pretending. Mom and Dad, they started trying again, too. Emails, birthday cards, a holiday dinner invite. I politely declined. But I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I felt distance. Not the painful kind. The healthy kind. The kind you need to breathe. The kind that reminds you that you survived something and built something better. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a building I owned. The same building Brandon once tried to pitch investors from. The same building where I learned just how powerful silence could be. Chloe handed me a glass of wine. Everyone's downstairs, she said. Should I tell them you're on your way? I looked down at the gala below. Tech founders, partners, clients, friends. People who saw me for who I was, not who I used to be. No, I said, let them enjoy the party. I'll come down when I'm ready. She smiled. You always do. As she left, I turned toward the skyline. Lights blinking, taxis humming, the city breathing. I thought of everything it took to get here. The humiliation, the betrayal, the silence, and the rise. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened my camera, snapped a photo of the view, and typed one sentence into the caption, "They laughed at the hoodie." Now I own the roof. And it makes me wonder, what would you have done in my shoes?